thank you for that recitation. Masha, it's beautiful. We have Sister Masuma, who has joined us again today. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
So today's topic is about age has no bounds. And somebody's written in, a parent has written in, Dear Masuma, my children are not as religious as I would like them to be. I was wondering if you had any advice in the form of your own experience or religiously speaking as to the best methods to encourage young children to be more religious, especially at the certain times of the year like Arba'in and Muharram. I've always been religious, but it's unfortunate that the apple doesn't always fall far from the tree.
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think it's important to first think about what do I mean by religious? Because a lot of the times I think religious is something that is dictated by culture, by my upbringing, so not necessarily by what Islam says.
Yeah.
So if my child is doing the wajib and staying away from the haram, then my child is religious.
Sure.
He's a Muslim. He's submitted to the will of Allah, and I should be really, really grateful and thankful for that.
Yeah.
I think it's really important that we concentrate on the wajib and the haram and role model the mustahabat. I think, to push the mustahabat is not a good idea. It's something that they will get to if they're doing the wajib and the haram.
Sure.
And the beautiful thing again about these amazing times in the year is that if I'm doing the wajib and the haram, or if my child is doing the wajib and and staying away from the haram, then their soul will be able to take on the blessings that are coming down on these special occasions.
Are you saying that from a perspective that not to burden that child?
Yes. Because again, take something very, very simple. Like for example, say if I want to go and have pizza at a non-Muslim restaurant, and I have a vegetarian pizza. Fine, fiqh-wise, it's fine. I'm allowed to. I'm not doing anything haram. Now, I may choose not to go to a non-Muslim restaurant to have vegetarian pizza because I think, there may be contamination. They may use the same, knife to cut it with or whatever. But that's me, where I am in my life, in my spiritual journey. Now, if I impose that on my children, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it very much like a prison for them. And the sad thing is what most parents do is they concentrate on the fiqh without the aqaid coming into play at all. So I'm telling my child constantly, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do this, you have to do this, you're not allowed to do this, you have to do this. Whereas all their friends are doing everything and anything else.
Yeah.
And they can't understand why they're not allowed to, and Islam feels like a prison to them.
Yeah.
Whereas if I, as a parent, had concentrated on the aqaid aspect, if I had built my child's relationship with God, that they understood who God was, they had a connection with Allah, they understood that God has made them with a purpose, that they are their soul, the wajib and the haram is for the soul, God does not become a bigger God or a lesser God if they worship him or not. All of it is for their own benefit. Then it becomes more like a sanctuary where God is trying to protect me. And so I see the sense in it. And therefore, when it becomes difficult, I still want to do it. So, when I look at all my other friends who are doing certain things which I may want to do, but because I understand it's not good for me, and that's why God's made it haram, I have the strength not to go down that route.
It's very difficult, isn't it, with children because of their, development and their understanding. It happens at different stages in their life. So, while obviously a parent has that wisdom, experience of life, they can teach them and yes, repeat those words. But for a child, it's a very tumultuous journey, isn't it, from childhood to adolescence and to adulthood, when really you start to find yourself and in the best will, Prophet Nuh, his son is a classic example that he was a prophet and his son erred,
but so did his wife.
Yes.
So again, it shows that you need both parents.
Yeah. So
even when you have a prophet as a father, you still need the mother.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to work as father and mother for the kids. I think a lot of the times one of the parents will step back, and in this day and age, it's usually the father that steps back and says, "Oh, the mother's doing it." But again, I think Prophet Nuh's story for me, the greatest lesson is you need both parents parenting. You can't just have one parent parenting.
But I think also then, you know, you have parents that are single parents and there's not a parent on the other side to give them that balance. So, and it could be for whatever reason that they are in that situation. But again, you know, and that parent could possibly just be the one voice that is good, and it could be a bad marriage that they've stayed together and there is that wife. But I mean, Imam Hassan, you know, his wife is an example of not so good. And I don't know, I feel that one parent, if they try their best, I mean,
of course.
And again, guidance comes from Allah. We never know if it's, but that's an interesting perspective. I've never heard sort of anyone.
I think you know, when you're looking at what I'm doing is I'm looking at the best case scenario.
And it's good,
and that's where you need both parents. But obviously, you can do it with one parent, but it's more difficult. And if you're a single parent, then it's probably easier than having two parents where they're both sort of pulling. So I think it's maybe easier to just be a single parent sometimes than to have a parent who's going against everything that you're saying.
That's a very good, I think, you know, perspective, because I think nowadays people they think, well, I'm religious and do I necessarily need a spouse? And, you know, we're talking about children, but they're the product of a marriage. And if they're not going to be looking for a religious spouse, then don't really have much hope then that, you know, you're going to be doing, you may do the double the work to compensate the non-religious parents. So if that's the environment they want their child to be in, it's from the onset of before conception, isn't it, really?
And the children are marriage, when you're thinking of who you're going to marry, to actually think about, is this the person I want to be, you know, the parent of my child?
Yeah, definitely.
I don't think we think like that.
No. So, and again, children are not like, you know, robots, toys you can switch on and off. Here's your religion and then switch it off. You know, it's they are going to be a continuous, you know, sort of, I think, manifestation of what you've taught them. And again, when they get to adolescence, they do question, don't they? If you've taught them well, that actually, what is it that I believe in? But in the younger years, I mean, what would you say would be a good idea, sort of, to introduce them into the mourning of, you know, this, you know, Muharram, and how best?
I think a lot of the times parents tend to, when their children are young, tend to sort of not come to mosque so often because it's difficult. You know, the child gets tired and then missing school. But again, I think it has a huge impact on the child to actually realise that there are certain times in the year which are important that I have to actually then be put out. And, you know, and again, children are very resilient. You know, that yes, they you know, they will moan and they'll, you know, probably throw tantrums and everything, but they will be okay with it. And I think it's just getting them used to it. And a lot of the times we don't do it, and I'm speaking from personal experiences, because it's difficult on me, because then I have to handle the tantrum and I have to handle the, you know, the difficult child the next morning and trying to get them up and go to school and stuff. But I think it's really important, like we said, I think a few episodes back, we talked about the fact that, you know, when you have a majlis where the Masayib of Imam Hussain alayhi salam is being recited, we have within, you know, a hadith which says that Bibi Fatima will be present there. Now, a child's soul is pure, so it will connect to Bibi Fatima's alayhi salam's soul. My soul may not, because it's not pure, but a child's soul is. So it's like, can you imagine that connection and the effect that connection is having on the soul of my child? It would be worth it just for that, just to bring my child to the majlis. I think it's so important to sort of realise things like that, and getting them again to realise that yes, we live in a secular world. You know, we live in a physical realm, but this is more important. You know, yes, you've got school, but you know what? This is more important. It's like a lot of the times we do things as parents which subconsciously tells my child
it's okay to not
put
prioritise
it on the back burner, because you know what? You've got to get through this. You know, you've got to do well at school. You've got to do this. You've got to do that. And Islam is put on the back burner, and I think that's dangerous. You know,
definitely, and I think that's you know, brilliant advice, because I think as even the month of Ramadan, Shahr Ramadan this year was late, you know, and children going to the mosque in the weekdays, and you're absolutely right that if we don't prioritise them, if we were raised by being at the mosque, and then the children are being given that sort of extra comfort, then imagine what the next generations will be if we start dropping those sort of, you know, commitment to our, and religion is a commitment, isn't it? It's not when you pick and choose what you want to do. You, as a parent, you're giving that example to the child that it's okay, it's just these days, but we get through it. So with children, I mean, would you say that, so we talk obviously about Imam Hussain, and I guess through everybody's journey in life, they connect to different personalities at different times, and to perhaps focus on the children who are actually suffering alongside, you know, with that journey, Imam Hussein.
And get the children to actually, you know, learn about the children that were there in Karbala and realize what they went through and, you know, how difficult it was for them, and, you know, to sort of lose their parents and their siblings and so forth, you know, and still be okay and still continue. And, you know, I think those are great lessons for children to learn. And again, I think it's realizing that they had that connection with Allah. I think that's the most important. I think, you know, we get so worried, as my child is getting towards becoming baligh, I get so worried about the fiqh aspect of it. But if the relationship with Allah is not being formed beforehand, then the fiqh will feel very forced.
Yes.
Whereas if the relationship has already been formed, then the child will take on the fiqh.
So it's the heart, isn't it? Connect the heart and then the physical.
Yeah, it'll make sense.
Yeah.
It'll all make sense. Whereas we concentrate on the fiqh so much, and, you know, we forget about the relationship that I need to have with Allah. You know, if I got my child to constantly talk to Allah, if I got my child, you know, everything went back to Allah. Everything that they said, everything that they did, it's like I constantly kept bringing it back to Allah. Then my child will learn to do that as well. So then when they're making decisions, when they're teenagers and they're making decisions, you know, at the back of their mind they've got God there, and they're thinking about, you know, taking it back to Allah again. So it's like I've taught it to them without actually making them sit down and teach it to them. You know, it's something that's become part and parcel of who they are.
It's interesting because I think, you know, we're very blessed in London that we have such, you know, strong communities and a host of, you know, youth that actually do a lot of commemorative events, which are very, again, youth understand youth and what the dynamics are and what their needs are. But as adults, you know, parents, we also have a lot of, you know, good madrasas that are, you know, running workshops. So it's important to get involved in those as well, isn't it? But I was just thinking about perhaps people who are, and as a final point, we've just got a couple of minutes left, that perhaps aren't so fortunate. They could be in a majority Muslim country, but actually the focus is not on faith. It's like looked at as being backward, and it's looked at as like, okay, you know, Muharram is just for going to the mosque and then you go back to your life, and, you know, and that's very difficult for children to sort of live in this dual sort of, you know, whether it's a Muslim country, whether it's the West, we all have our own difficulties, don't we? And what would you suggest is what the children, parents should focus on? So perhaps from the start, and then, I mean, how would you say, just as a final note?
I think it's just getting them to sort of, you know, understand the whole message rather than just taking them to mosque and just leaving them there, sort of thing. I remember when my children were young, one of the things one of my children said to me was, why is it 1 minute that everyone just cries and then the next minute they're laughing and joking and drinking tea? And it was so difficult to answer because it's like, you know, it doesn't make sense because children see things very black and white. If you're sad and you're crying, how can then the very next minute you be laughing and joking? And again, it's, you know, we need to sort of question, okay,
absolutely,
what's happening here? You know, is it just a tick box exercise, or am I actually feeling something? And if I'm feeling something, then it wouldn't be so easy for me just to laugh and joke the next minute. I would talk, but I wouldn't be laughing and joking. So again, I think we need to sort of be thinking about these things because kids pick up on these things.
Yeah, I think that's just that's a very, very, and children often say the, you know, like you said, black and white, but the brutal truth, and it's, you know, it's such an innocent perspective that you think, wow, you know, as adults we become corrupt, and obviously sin overtakes us. So it's and it's very a worthwhile, you know, emphasis that, you know, perhaps don't start sipping the tea straight away, but think about why we're there, and actually, you know, perhaps at that moment talk to your child if you've reconnected with them, if they're in a different part of the mosque.
And listen to what they're asking you, and actually, you know, answer them, and sort of, you know, I think a lot of the times as parents we think that our child is given to us for us to help them grow. Yeah. But God's given us that child to help us grow as well. Definitely. So, you know, it's a two-way thing.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much once again. It's been really insightful, and hopefully the parents who are listening have gained from your knowledge as well. Inshallah, we'll see you next time. Next up are Mini Hussainis.